This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is flyer number 443, part 2, entitled Sage Masculists Care More About Intelligence Than Looks when Judging a Woman's Sexual Marketplace Value, SMV. Continuing straight on. Since I'm an elite male, I appeal to the hypergamous nature of women, who are hardwired to be more attracted to smarter men than dumber men. So when I was e-dating, I would get lots of contacts from women. What struck me about these hundreds and hundreds of women who the e-dating company would send me was the low level of education the vast majority of these women had. I would reject immediately about 95% of them, purely on education level, that is IQ grounds. So my top criterion was intelligence, not any other criterion for the top slot. Of course, I had other criteria that I used. For example, I would reject in a tenth of a second any obese as being sexually repulsive, evoking the yuck reaction in me. Probably the next most important criterion I used was their religiosity. I'm a practicing atheist and a scientist, so I don't have much patience with people who believe in pie in the sky by and by. That is, people who believe in life after death, virgin births, resurrections, miracles, angels, and other 2,000-year-old superstitions. Such fundamental differences in worldviews would make the relationship untenable, so dozens of women who passed the first hurdle with master's degrees and above got wiped by me. I have no patience with religionists for the same kind of reason as having no patience with flat earthers. I don't respect people whom I label Iscyanate fairies, who by definition are incapable of thinking scientifically due to their ignorance of science, living in a fairyland, believing what they want to believe without evidence, hence are free to believe whatever they like. If they are free to believe in anything they want, they are free to believe in the tooth fairy. I didn't take tooth fairies seriously, so dismissed them immediately on e-dating sites. The woman I did choose, and vice versa, had much the same criteria as I did. She and I had a fairly high level of compatibility. Both are world-travelled, multicultured, had advanced degrees, and did not tolerate fools. So, I do wonder why the manosphere puts such emphasis on looks as a criterion for judging SMV, when I would say most content creators on the manosphere are very smart. There are only a few hundred of them, at most, spread over the earth, most of them in the English-speaking countries, where most of the planet's new ideas come from, although I notice there are quite a few from Germany, a high IQ country, in brackets, with an average IQ of 105, like China. But China is a political shithole that has banned gender politics, so no feminism, no masculism, so fuck China, in brackets, even though I lived 12 years in that third world backwater. I'm wondering if the manosphere video creators are overemphasizing the importance of looks and underestimating the importance of IQ in their personal choices of partners. For peakers, it's a different story, I can imagine, which is all I can do, since it's difficult for me to put myself in the shoes of a peaker, since I've been born into the brain of a sage all my life. I can't imagine what it would be like to live a life without being glued to a book all the time. To peakers, there are a ton of other peakers, given the nature of the IQ bell curve. So for peakers, there is not the crushing necessity to choose people with high IQs to avoid boredom and contempt as shown towards peakers by sages. So, if having a high IQ is not an issue for peakers, what criteria are left? Well, there are the other main criteria for attractiveness. For example, for men, slimness in women, women's curviness, niceness in women's personality, brackets, certainly not feminazi bitchery, which will get a woman crossed off even faster than if she's an obese, since both are repulsive to men, close brackets. Prettiness is probably the top criterion, since evolution has wired men to be sexually attracted to a pretty face, since that prettiness correlates with good female genes. So evolution has selected men who are attracted to pretty women, who were more likely to have kids who survived into adulthood and reproduced themselves. Women who had good genes evolved to have pretty, symmetric faces that men were attracted by, thus creating a co-evolutionary spiral. A really pretty face really turns men's heads when such a woman walks into a room. These 10 women, that is 10 out of 10 in looks, are rare, film star types. Most people, that is 2/3 of them, score 4, 5 or 6 in looks. Several women have scored my looks at 6, and my female partner is at about that level too, so we are matched in the looks department. I would not be attracted to a woman lower than that, given that I can afford to pick and choose as an elite male, at least in intelligence terms. I'm certainly no TDH, that's tall, dark and handsome, alpha type of male, whom women wet over. I had a friend who was an alpha and was fascinated to watch how women reacted towards him. I remember one time taking him to the cafeteria of a local hospital for med students when I was an undergrad, so that the staff could not distinguish me from the med students. I would watch the very uncomfortable reactions of the young nurses as they watched him. They were definitely roused. At a recent half-century reunion of my old undergrad friends, one of them had had a relationship with him and described it as falling in lust. I'm certainly not in that category, so I would not be able to attract an extremely pretty woman, but no matter, since looks are less important to me than brains. I get quickly bored by slow-witted people and just walk away, preferring to amuse myself with my books written by people with better brains than mine, especially written by the genius male math brains, whose work I admire enormously and wish I had been born with such a brain. That would make my understanding of the genius mathematics they dream up so easily, so much easier, instead of the trench warfare of trying to understand how each line follows from the previous line, giving me what I call brain strain. So, I guess the point of this flyer is that those video content makers in the manosphere, given their superior intelligence, ought to place more emphasis on the importance of intelligence than looks in their criteria for judging the SMV of potential partners. I certainly do, and I suspect so too do a lot of them as well. So my bottom line is that the manosphere is doing the importance of intelligence a disservice and should emphasize it more as a criterion for partner compatibility. Looks, in my books, are overrated. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 440 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.